Oh, it's dope. You can see that on. I didn't know they could do all that. I didn't know you could do it like that on
Yeah,
Zoom.
man. Good evening, everyone. This is Joshua Reynolds with American Legacy Network, and I am excited to welcome you to a very special edition of Meet the Producers, featuring Kwame Mason. And so I'm going to read a little bit about Mr. Mason, and then we're going to get right into the conversation and talk a little bit about his career, his work, and why he is a producer you all need to know about. So, Damon Kwame Mason was born and raised in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. He's worked in the entertainment field since 1996. Aired on CFMT. In 1999, he began a 13-year career in in radio broadcasting as an on-air personality in Ontario and as well as Alberta. He finished his documentary called Soul on Ice, Past, Present, and Future back in 2015, which talks about Black athletes in hockey. That film has won the Viewer's Choice for Best Film at the Edmonton International Film Festival, and he also was given the Unsung Hero Award at the Future Aces Awards in Toronto. So if you'd like to learn more about his film, please visit soulonicemovie.com. And before we really get started, I want to also encourage you to subscribe to American Legacy Network.tv. If you have not already, for just $3.99 a month, you can stream all types of wonderful Black content that you'll see here on our Facebook page, as well as a lot of content from various movie styles and everything that is Black culture. So, Kwame, what's going on, man?
I'm good, bro. How are you, man?
I'm
Been a
doing
minute.
pretty good.
Been a minute. Been a minute.
It's been a minute. I haven't seen you since probably January, February when we were on the tour bus, and I'm of course rocking the hoodie from that tour
There you
bus. And
go. There you go.
so, so
Were you there in Seattle? Were you in Seattle?
nah, I didn't get to go to Seattle.
So that probably last time I saw you was L.A.
Nah, I think I saw you
No,
in DC. Actually, it was in DC.
DC. That's right. That's right. My
Yep,
bad.
it
That's
was in
right. That's right.
DC. So I didn't get to go on all the other tours. I was there in St. Louis as well.
Yeah,
So St. Louis and Detroit. So those two cities, I got to see three cities. It was pretty dope.
for real.
But tell us, man, how did you get into the entertainment business? What drew you there?
It's one of those things that I think that as a child I always knew I wanted to do something like that. I just never had anybody to focus me in that right direction. Um, I just never had that push. So, I would always try things here and there. Um, Started performing like, I was rapping. I had a little hip hop crew and doing all that in Toronto, which was pretty big in the early 90s and stuff. Um, and then I guess it was around 96 is when I got my first kind of like local start, which was on this show called Fat TV, which is like an entertainment style show. It's like, it's like a rap city and, all that. I was like the host, over the top, hip hop guy, talk
Okay,
to everybody. So I got into it there, and that was a good little run. That was a good little first experience. And then, a couple years after that, I got my first radio job, and that just I kind of stayed in that world. But I always wanted to do like film. I wanted to act. I wasn't really thinking about directing or anything like that at the time. But my whole thing was like being in front of the camera because I had a big ego back then. And so yeah, just did 14 years on the radio, and then boom, I was like, just transition. So that's kind of how I got started in the entertainment business, man. It was just kind of one of those things that I always wanted to do, and I just kind of had to figure out a way to get into it.
got you. Yeah, so like I saw this. I was reading an interview with you and Erica Ayala
Mhm.
on NHL.com, and I saw a few pictures of you when you were a few years younger with like Eve, Chuck D, and Jay Z. Who are some
Yeah.
other heavy hitters that you got to meet and talk to back in your early career?
Oh man, well, I was fortunate to grow up around a time when a lot of the legends that we know of nowadays were were just starting out. So like my very first television interview was during was with Jay-Z. That was his first album, Reasonable Doubt.
Wow.
Um, so that was interesting. Jay-Z, Beyonce, Mary J. Blige, Khalees when she first came out. My first radio interview was Eminem on his first album.
Wow.
And the funny thing about that was around that time, everybody knew me as the guy who had a camera with him. I always had a camera. And people used to always try to clown me, like, you're always with this camera, you're always with this camera. And I'm like, oh yeah, well, you'll see. So to this day, I got classic pictures of, like, I always made sure that if I interviewed somebody, I made sure I took a picture with them, just so that when my time has passed and my little man is grown up, he could see some of the stuff that I did. So yeah, so I hit a man, Guru, Talib Kweli, uh, most of the Wu-Tang Clan, man, you name it. In the '90s, I probably interviewed them or did some work with them.
Wow. So how did you transition from radio to doing film, and like what was that process like for you?
Um, well, basically, when I was working at this radio station in Alberta, I was kind of getting burnt out with that whole idea because I wasn't there was creativity. I wasn't allowed to do certain things, and radio just got so basic, and it was just not challenging. It was just too easy to do,
Okay.
and you know um, sometimes I used to look at that and I'd just be like, man, you're just going in there for 4 hours. You're talking maybe 3 or 4 times an hour, and you're getting paid for that. Like, why don't you just sit down and just chill out and do that? But something in me was just, I just felt like I was just stopping. My process was stopping. So, just life just took me in that direction where I was just at that point where I was like, I always wanted to make a film, and I figured if I was going to do it, I got to do it now. So I just took a leap of faith, man, and just transitioned it because I was always into film. I was especially always into documentaries, and documentaries were starting to really bubble around, the early 2000s. Like, Michael Moore's documentary was out, and I would watch, like, I'd always, whenever, every Tuesday, I'd go and buy DVDs, and I'd always buy the ones and make sure they had great special features. I always liked the short docs about people's process, so I always knew that's kind of something I wanted to do. So after myself and my last radio station parted ways, I was like, okay, well, what are you gonna do? And so I was like, well, next thing is film, so let's go.
Gotcha. So, so we can transition real quick into talking about your film Soul and Ice.
Mm.
So, what was that process like? Now, I know you said documentaries kind of started getting popular in the early 2000s, but Soul and Ice came out in 2015, correct?
Yeah, it came out 2015.
So, how long did you work on it before you actually were
Released
put it
it.
out? Hmm.
It took me 3 years to create it, 3 years to work on it fully. I had the idea for a while. I had the idea probably around 2006, 2007.
Hmm.
I knew I wanted to do a documentary that was about the history of blacks in the game. I just didn't know exactly. I didn't have it really mapped out, but I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I would just kind of do research every now and then, and I'd put it away, and then the next year would come, and I'd look through my notes, or I'd see something online, and I would just kind of build something. So it wasn't until about 2011, 2012, um, that I was just like, okay, boom, let's go. And 2012 is when that was my first interview, and then I was shooting and putting things together till about I would say July 2015, and then released it in October that same year.
Wow. Now, did you do all the editing yourself, or who did you have a team around you to help put it together?
Yeah, so there's a guy I met out of Alberta in Edmonton. His name's Adam Kidd. I was, I was at that point where I had all the footage I needed, and now it was time to edit it down. We just finally, for the first time, got like a grant, so I was able to pay for, or hire somebody professional to do this. So it was between. I met with this girl. Oh, I didn't meet with this girl, but I talked to her. She was all right. This other guy I talked to was cool, but something just didn't click. But this one guy, his name's Adam Kidd. When I went to his office, he was just all about it. And so we went with him, and he's the guy who kind of saved the project. It was, if it wasn't for him, like that, the film wouldn't be what it is today.
Wow. So speaking of that, I want to show everyone the first 2 minutes of the film. I'm not going to give you much more than that for two reasons. One, I want to keep talking to Kwame, but also I'm going to encourage you guys to go out and actually purchase the film. It's a wonderful, wonderful piece. So just give me 1 second, y'all. I'm going to bring it up.
Yeah, the game is exciting, but in the hood, growing up, there's no ice rinks. You don't really get to play.
If kids in grade school had ice hockey as part of their gym, you don't think we'd have some phenoms by the time they get to high school? You kidding me?
It's not really part of our culture like basketball and football are, but it's exciting from what I've seen.
I've been hearing things like this my whole life about the game I fell in love with at a young age. As a Canadian, it's what we're known for. But I'm Canadian, so why did I feel like it wasn't for me? Was it because I didn't see me? Or was it because I didn't hear about me? Today it's a lot different. It almost seems like they came out of nowhere. But there's always the first. Those who broke down the barriers, those who persevered through adversity, and those who played the game because it's in their soul.
Nice.
And when we make it, we gon' put our soul on ice. Cause when they doubted us, we did it twice. I guess the proof is in the freezer. They tried to get rid of us, but they need us.
He needs to see players achieving at the highest level that look like him.
We double up when our numbers come through the TV. Yeah, soul on ice. I'ma put my soul on ice.
Whether you're black, white, or whatever, especially if you're black, you owe it to yourself if you're playing a sport to know your history.
We in the club, stadium, Mandy, arena, cousin. Put me on ice and I'm hitting that top. Trees are dusting, fussing.
There isn't a sport out there that any child or anyone can't do because of the color.
He's always reciting the poetry of my power, statistic of my weakness, shadow box.
All right, everyone. So you saw the first 2 minutes and 30 seconds or so of this documentary. So there's a lot to unpack here. So let's start with
that thing is crazy. I'm sorry, man. That thing is crazy.
the intro.
That film is crazy.
It
Telling
is.
you, man. That soundtrack, that Socrates Soul on Ice song. Whew.
Yo, so that was actually the first question I had for you, because that's also the song that I hear on the front end and the back end of your podcast as well. So is Socrates and Soul on Ice. Can you talk to us a little bit about that song first and how that came to be a part of your project?
So, I mean, Socrates in Canada, that's the homie. He, very popular hip hop artist. He was signed to Gilla House with Redman. He was also signed to Def Jam for a minute, but he's just a great artist from Toronto, and I've known him for years just through the industry, and and I always knew that if I was gonna make a film, like the music's got to sound funky. That's just that's just where I'm from. That's where my heart is, and I always thought that hip hop and hockey has never been mixed in the way it should be. And so I reached out to the homie, and he was gracious. And I remember when he sent me that track, man, I had goosebumps, and I was like, it's over. This is the jam. I wish I did more with it, but I was really, really happy with how it came out. Yeah.
Yeah, you talk about how hip hop and hockey didn't necessarily cross over too much or intersect too much. I remember one of the podcast episodes you were talking to Joel Ward, and he was talking about how, when he was out in Nashville, he had to introduce his teammates to hip hop, and they were getting him to go into like a country bar. Can you talk about the importance of music in hockey, and then also, because a lot of the work that you do in the world of hockey, how important it is for hip hop to be in that space as well?
Well, I mean, music and sports have always come, they're always hand in hand. It's just, there's not one athlete that won't tell you that when they, get ready for a game or they're working out, they want to hear something that just motivates them. And, the day and age we're in right now, the predominant music is hip hop music. So these kids in the locker rooms now, they're listening to hip hop music. And I always felt that the industry of hockey they weren't catching up to what the trends were saying. So when you'd watch hockey or you watch highlights, you never got that urban feel to it. And so I wanted to make it a point that I put that just so people can see that, so they can feel a little bit more comfortable. And you'll see a lot more, melding of the two. And hip hop has always embraced hockey. Hockey just never embraced hip hop. In the 90s, you go down to Snoop Dogg, to Saint Lunatics, Nelly, Queen Latifah, any of the major hip hop artists of the 90s. If you look at most of their videos, somebody's wearing a hockey jersey. Here in Canada, if they were, if someone was doing a show, if you're an artist and you want, there's always that first impression. So even if you're an established artist, when you hit that stage, you want that crowd to just to bug out, and they're gonna bug out when you come out. But if you want them to truly bug out in Canada, wear a hockey jersey. And I'll tell you, man, when you see like 50 Cent or Snoop or any of those guys come out and they're rocking, the local jersey, people would just go nuts, And so hip hop has always had love for the game of hockey, in the fashion sense. It just never infiltrated in the game sense, but it is now. And, like Joel was saying in the podcast, it's like when, in the locker room, guys are listening to what they want to listen to. And, when you guys want to bond and hang out, they kind of go out to whatever bar, club, and, they would take them to a country club. Yeah. And then when it was time for him, now it's like, yo, okay, now it's my night. You guys got to come to my club. Yeah. He would take them to the reggae spot or like a hip hop spot. Mm-hmm. And them boys could only last about 5 minutes before they want to leave, which is funny, but it's kind of sad. Just imagine you're the only black guy on the team, and you want to So every weekend, I got to go to a country and western bar and stand in the corner and have guys side eyeing me, and I can't go to the spot where I want to go to.
Yeah.
And when you guys do come, you're quick to leave. Like, yo, that's crazy. But things are changing.
Yeah, that's real crazy. I mean, it kind of speaks to tokenism. It speaks to, being tolerant and not just tolerant, but being accepting and open to other people's cultures and that type of thing. And so, I think that kind of ties into, the concept of culture and being open to other people is hockey itself. Now, firstly, Soul and Ice talks about the Black history of hockey. And for those who don't know, I mean, Black people have been involved in hockey since the inception of the sport, pretty much. Mm-hmm. And so Soul and Ice speaks to that. But what got you in hockey other than being Canadian? And what has your
Yeah,
relationship been to the sport? Like, did you play?
right.
How far did you go playing? And what got you interested in exploring the Black history in hockey?
I mean, again, like I just, as I remember myself, I remember as I know myself from as far back as I can remember. I just know hockey. It was just the neighborhood we were in. When there was a lot of kids around that neighborhood, and it was during a time when cars didn't go up and down your streets like it was. A car would pass maybe every hour or something, and if it did, it was probably somebody coming home from work or something like that. So we
Mhm.
always had a spot to play, and there was so much kids, so we just went out there and played like every day. You just couldn't get around it. And so, again, then you have our hockey night in Canada, and when I was a kid, my favorite team was like the Montreal Canadiens. So it was just something that was always there, and it wasn't until later on that I got to play. My brother played first, and then I was just like, I got to get on there and play. Besides that, it was more like playing shinny hockey, like in the winter. Sometimes, like the basketball court would ice up, and a couple of us would just get out there and just have your stick and some gloves, and you just go and play. But I didn't. It was until later on that I played organized, and I played like 2 years, and I was pretty good, but I didn't have anybody that really sat down and broke the game down to me as
Mhm.
playing it. So I was mainly, the reason why we play, like from my dad's point of view, was that in the winter you play hockey, in the summer you're playing soccer. So we always kept active, like all year round we were doing something. But we were also doing indoor soccer, so stopping hockey wasn't too much of a big deal because, like again, like I loved playing it, but I hated carrying my hockey bag down to the rink. Like that was crazy. That was like these kids nowadays, they're spoiled because I had to trek and put I used to have to just I would just put my equipment on at home and walk to the arena with the bag. Um, but as far as my growth in the game and the reason why I wanted to make the film, I remember being in Calgary to watch my first live game, and I remember seeing black guy out there, and my boss at the time from this radio station I was working at, who took me there. I was like, "Yo, who's that guy?" And he's like, "That's Jerome McGill now. He's our captain." I was like, "Oh snap! This guy is wicked. He's black. I'm paying attention again." Like there was because it's not like all my life I was a hockey head. Like I took years off and I would watch here and there, but I never really followed it. But when Jerome McGill started rocking with the Flames, I was all in. I just wanted to see this guy, and then I was paying attention a lot more and seeing a lot of guys like Anson Carter and George the Rock, and guys were playing in Atlanta, and then I just noticed. I remember again when I was just thinking about Blacks hockey, I was doing some research, and I found this article on the Colored Hockey League of the Maritimes, which happened in 1895 to about 1905. And that blew me away because, again, like being in Canada, this is a piece of history that I should have known just for the simple fact that I was Canadian, just for the simple fact that it's hockey, and just for the simple fact that Canada's got this image of it's a hockey multicultural country. And,
Mhm.
our staple hockey shows never told me about this. So I felt ripped off, and I felt like, well, if I'm ripped off, then how many people around the world are being ripped off? And I think if I'm correct, Soul on Ice is the first time, really truly, in a film form that people got to really, on a massive basis, learn about the Colored Hockey League in the Maritimes. Unless you picked up the book Black Ice, which I believe was on. I believe was I know it was big book. Cuba Gooding Jr. highly recommended that book. I feel, if I'm correct, like Oprah Winfrey had it on her book list. But I just felt like from when I saw that, I was like, okay, I got to make this film.
Yeah, I feel you. I mean, I grew up playing hockey in Mount Vernon, New York, and then played in high school a little bit. And I was always the only black kid on the team.
Mhm.
And then obviously I heard about the book called, about the Colored Hockey League. I was like, wow, that's crazy. Like there was a Colored Hockey League in Nova Scotia and back in, the late 1800s. And you're right. I think your film is definitely the first to put it in the film format, which was, for me personally, really exciting because when you're especially in the States, when you're a black hockey player, you're kind of a unicorn. And so to see the abundance of blackness that exists in the hockey world all in one space was really encouraging, and you felt like there was a bit of community.
Yeah.
And so I think, for me personally, that film was really impactful. It also kind of went to prove a lot of people, a lot of detractors wrong. Growing up, you play hockey and they're like, what are you playing that for? You should be playing basketball or whatever it is. And it came from everybody, but my question is, one, it was really important to see all the history that you presented in that film. And I think you did a really great job of capturing the past, present, and future aspect, looking at the Colored Hockey League up to like Herb Carnegie and his brother, to Willie O'Ree, and then obviously to the people who are present, and then looking forward and saying, one day hopefully we can get a whole line of black players. And that might be able to happen in LA in the next couple of years. Looking at
Quentin Byfield and
Nikhil
and Thomas.
Exactly. And so, but the question is, there was the Colored Hockey League book, but how else did you get information about black hockey history, and how hard was it to get it and verify it? Because as a documentarian, you're obviously only going to put forth truth and have journalistic integrity. But how did you go about the process of actually finding out all the information that is displayed in that film?
There's also another great book. It's called Breaking the Ice by an author who lives in New York. His name is Cecil Harris.
Okay.
That was really my main source, my biggest first piece of information. Cecil's in the film as well. You actually see him at the end. He's in it. He talks mainly about Herb Carnegie, but I used that a lot as my source. And then it was just a lot was going around and talking to people and getting their perspective, and just being inside the arenas and just hearing from people, and just again thinking of the film not from a director's mindset, but from a fan's mindset. Like I put myself in the seat of myself, saying like, what do I want to know about blacks in the game of hockey? How they feel, what they had to go through, what's it like? Like I just knew that nobody spoke about black athletes in the game of hockey the way Soul on Ice did. So before 2015, you'd see these pockets of interviews, but nothing that really broke it down like that. So, and I wanted to hear all that. I didn't want to just see one guy being interviewed for 10, 15 minutes and that's it, or 5 minutes, and then, read some article. I wanted it in the form because, prior to that, there was a documentary, I think it was called The History of Hockey, and they talked about everything, and they just kind of just brushed by blacks in the game. And I was like, okay, that's not fair. You know what I mean? So I thought, like, I want to get the whole gauntlet of that experience. I wanted to get the experience of the guys that played in the 50s, 60s. I wanted to get the experience of the guys who played in the 70s and 80s. I wanted to get the experience of the guys who just recently retired, and I wanted to look at the young kids right now and see where their mindsets are at, and see what and how they're going to take the game going forward. which is, again, it was very interesting how that whole thing came together. Just like the whole idea of past, present, and future, and putting it in the name was just like, okay, that's, this is exactly what I want to tell.
So were interviewees and people very receptive to the project that you were putting together?
Not not at the beginning. It took a while. Like I said, it took a while.
Yeah.
And I only equate that because, here I am, this guy who's never made a film. I didn't have a major production company. I didn't have a major network behind me. A lot of times I was running around by myself with a Canon 5D camera when, my boy Michael P. Douglas couldn't come out and help me shoot. He helped me shoot a lot of stuff, but he had other things he had to do, in life, and he couldn't put all that time. Whereas I was just putting all my time into that. So, and then you're talking. It's I think now if you ask a player of color to talk on camera about their experience, it's a lot easier for them to do it now than it was when I was asking, because nobody had asked them that. And a lot of times guys didn't want to just be the only ones doing it. So it just kind of it ended up being a snowball effect for the most part. And, one guy would do it, then another guy would hear about it, and then he'd be like, yeah, okay, sure. And 6 degrees of separation, if this person's doing it, then that person will do it, and there's so much more guys that I wish were in the film, like Darren Banks, he was in the film, Bryce Salvador, Jamal Mayers, all these guys that I really wanted to be in the film. And for the most part, I tried to reach out to them through like Twitter and Facebook or whatever it was, whatever I could. And, I never really got some of their responses, which is okay, and it's too bad. But, I tried my best to get as many people as I possibly could in there. But I just kind of hope that as an overall piece, even if a person wasn't in there, they can look at it and be like, yeah, you know what? I would have probably said the exact same thing.
Amazing. And so, how so you said that people weren't necessarily receptive early on, but they kind of grew into it.
Yeah.
Since you're celebrating essentially the 5-year anniversary of the release of Soul on Ice, almost a decade of the production that went behind it. What kind of impact has your film had on the hockey world and the sports world in general?
Well, in my humble opinion, I think what that film did was made people feel a lot easier in talking about our history and our contribution. I remember when I was first starting out, a lot of people didn't think that it would be a film that would be receptive because of the simple fact that they thought that all I was going to do was like bash the white establishment of the game and just say, look what they did to us. And I had a lot of interviews, man. When I was starting out, I had a lot of people that I was interviewing that just quit the game, couldn't deal with the racism or the taunting, and and I didn't really want it to come across like that. Myself and Michael, again, who worked with me on the film, one of our main goals was to be able to make sure that this was educational. I wanted people to walk away and learn something about our history. Our history isn't always negative. There's always this idea that when you're talking about Black history, that we're going to be talking about something negative or some woe is me type of, and I was like, no, we celebrating what Mike Marsden and Tony McKegney and Val James and Grant Fuhrer and some of these guys went through. That's fact. We can't get away from, you can't pretend like somebody didn't throw a banana at Wayne Simmons when he was on the ice. You can't pretend that social media didn't blow up against Joe Ward when he scored a game-winning goal against Boston. You can't pretend that didn't happen. You can't pretend that Mike Marsden didn't get death threats just because he was Black. That's a fact.
Right.
But you also have to celebrate the fact that these guys never quit. And I think that's the theme that I wanted kids to get out of this. It's like, there's a lot of people, like you said yourself, you're like the only black kid on the team.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of kids out there who are the only black person playing on the team, for the most part, felt like they were the only ones, and they were the only ones going through this. So they had nobody to lean on. Soul on Ice let them know, it's like, yo, we all been through this. We all have gone through what you've gone through, little homie. So you know that you have a community. Maybe we don't know each other right now, but there's a community. And I think what Soul on Ice did was start what we see now. What you see now is a result of Soul on Ice coming out, the NHL adopting certain tactics and promoting certain things, and guys feeling comfortable talking. It all started in 2015, bro.
Wow.
It all started in 2015. And, I'm not saying that Soul on Ice was the end all to be all. All I'm saying is that when that film came out, conversations started to be had that before that time people weren't having.
That's a drop the mic moment right there.
I'm just saying,
I feel you. Yeah, that's definitely a drop the mic moment. I mean, I'm someone who played hockey growing up. I listened to your podcast driving into the office every morning on the way to work.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, man. I mean, I also encourage people to listen to the podcast. One, because you know what? Honestly, I feel like it adds a lot of flavor. That's a word you use a lot on there, is flavor, right? It adds a lot of flavor to the game of hockey. And a lot of times people have like this idea of what hockey players act like and their personalities. And it, honestly, it can be kind of dry sometimes. If I'm keeping it funky, but like, I think it's dope that it adds a lot of flavor. But how did you get connected with the NHL? Now, I know the first couple episodes of the podcast were kind of independent, and then you guys were picked up on the NHL network. Like, how did that happen for you?
So the brainchild of the podcast was Akil's and Elijah's. Like, it was all their idea to do a podcast. I always wanted to get back and do a podcast because, again, 14 years on the radio, I always said I missed that idea. And I don't miss being a part of a corporate station because I could not do it the way it is or the way they portray it nowadays. I can't do that. But I always love getting on a mic, just talking and having conversations and interviewing people. That's something that I've always missed. And Elijah and Akil came to me, those are the nephews. They were like, big homie, we want to do this podcast based on hockey. Me and Elijah got these banter together, XYZ. And I was like, yo, all right, let me, what do you need? Let me show you how to do it. Let me talk you through. Let me, advise you how to. And they were like, no, we want the three of us to do it. I was like, oh, okay. I said, okay, well, that dynamic could be pretty interesting. Like, I'm like the old guy. They're the young bucks. I can help them in the sense of controlling the conversation and, and get them going because they're still hockey guys. They're still young. They're still trying to find their voice. Elijah's got a very dry, monotone, if you don't know him, you think like, holy smoke, can this kid wake up? But that's just who he is, where Akil is like kind of like a smart mouth, still has that hockey flavor to him, but he's like the pesky little brother to Elijah. So I thought, okay, this could be a cool little dynamic. And so, we just started doing it on our own, and all the interviews we kind of get is, 6 degrees of separation. They're people that we know, and they decide to, jump on board with us. But then, ever since my films come out, as you know, I've been, I do a lot of work alongside the NHL, and, we just kind of thought, hey, well, why don't we put it under the NHL brand of podcasts and just kind of up the profile a little bit. So, we just kind of, we said, oh, sure. I was like, okay, I'm about it. And so, that's how that connection came about. And so, we just drop we drop an episode every Wednesday, and, it's slowly growing. We're not at the spitting chicklets level, but we're also not a bunch of guys that are cursing and yelling and screaming, and we're just trying to keep it gully, just
Right.
how we see it. But we're hoping that we'll get a little bit more support from the hockey community, especially the Black hockey community, because this is something that nobody else is doing.
Right.
This is a first, and so we're hoping that we're trying to crack that. Like, how do we get to 5,000, 10,000 listeners a week? I know they're out there. It's just how to get them. So
Right.
we're just trying to right now make sure that we have some good guests and have some fun conversations, and and see what happens.
Now you definitely have some good guests. I'm gonna name some names in a minute, so I have the podcast open in front of me. But for those who don't know, he talks about the nephews who are Akil, Thomas, and Elijah. For those who don't know who they are, Akil Thomas they're both high level hockey players who are Black guys playing hockey. Akil Thomas got drafted by the LA Kings a couple years ago, and Elijah he played in the Ontario Hockey League. And now he's playing for, it's Ryerson, right?
Yeah, Ryerson University.
Yeah. So Ryerson University, which is in Toronto.
Yeah.
So he's playing high level hockey as well. And so just in case folks don't actually know who those two people are, they're very Googleable.
Yeah.
So if you Google Akil Thomas, you will see the goal where he scored the winning goal against Russia. I don't remember what year it was, but it
was
last year.
The anniversary's coming up, the year anniversary.
Yeah,
last year for the World Juniors.
That's what it was.
Okay. Not last year, this year's World Juniors that came up. World Juniors is coming up again. World Juniors is a big tournament for the kids that are just on their way to the NHL. And Akil scored the game-winning goal for Canada.
Cool. Yeah. The video's crazy. Just hit it up on YouTube, y'all. It's amazing. He hops over the board, gets a breakaway, and falls into net, and the puck flies over the goal. It's pretty amazing.
He does he toe drags it, puts it on his backhand while falling,
right,
and top shelves on him. I'm telling you, it's like one of the top 5 World Junior goals ever, in my opinion.
Right. And he talks about it on the podcast a little bit too, about the experience and what he was going through before that happened.
Yeah.
I want to get into the connection between you and American Legacy in the NHL. So there is a connection now. Folks, I've probably noticed I haven't mentioned that his documentary is on the network. It's on YouTube. It's on his website and a couple other places. But there is also a connection between Kwame and American Legacy Network. There actually is a. I'm going to pull this up on my screen now. But yeah, so Kwame, you also curated what people are seeing on my screen now, which is the Black Hockey History Tour. That was put on by the NHL. Can you talk to us a little bit about that and how that came to be? And
that is probably one of the coolest things that I've ever been a part of and was able to help work on. Your dad and the brilliant Kim Davis got together and wanted to put this mobile tour together. From what I understand, Kim having history, Kim Davis, who's an executive over at the NHL, obviously has years with your father, and knowing what your father has done with these tours, thought this would be a great idea for hockey. And so she, this is when she was just starting at the league, and she knew my knowledge of the game and our history in the game, and she partnered me up with Alicia Chin, who's no longer working with the NHL, but her and I just put our heads together and said, okay, how can we make a mobile museum look really cool? And so we just kind of thought of it like how I thought about the film, and just said, okay, we got to look at the past, we got to look at the present, we got to look at the future. And what are some of the artifacts that we could put in this museum that people are going to be able to look at and, and be able to say they learned something after they walk out of the mobile museum. So, it was in its second year it was 2 years that we did it. And The first year I think we had like 6 teams, and then we went to 6 stops, and then the next year we went to like 14 or 12 or 14.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's just great to be a part of, and it's just something really cool to see. When you go into a city and people are lining up outside just to walk through this museum, and to you know I loved going on those tours because I loved being in there, and crowds of people are there, and somebody standing in front of you know a Marvel comic book, and they're just staring at it, and I'm just like, okay, well, that right there, that's Spider-Man. And in this comic book you have Herb Carnegie inside there, and people are just like, what are you telling me Marvel did a comic book with a hockey player, a black hockey player at that, a black hockey player who played in the, and it's like, being able to tell that story is really great. Or to show them artifacts like Willie O'Ree's game worn jersey from when he broke the color barrier in 1958. All those little things that are in the bus are just great because you get young and old. The young are just discovering it, and the older are like, "Oh wow, I remember that guy, and whatever happened to that player," and and discovering something new that they didn't know. So it's just too bad, COVID has struck. We more than likely won't be having, we won't be having it this year, but I
Mm-hmm.
hope to be able to bring it back because that's kind of one of my highlights in February, to be a part of the mobile museum.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. The museum is definitely a highlight, and there's just a treasure trove of info that you got on there, and
Yeah.
similar to the movie and to other books that have come out, for people to actually get to walk on and live and breathe it and see it. I don't know if everyone saw one of the pictures that I had. They're my personal hero, hockey hero, Kevin Weeks, right here, was talking to a group of people. I think that was the first year that picture was taken, and this is the second year's
Yeah,
tour
yeah.
bus here that's showing up on the screen. But you had some heavy hitters. This is kind of a theme I'm realizing in your career is you get to hang out with some heavy hitters. So back in the '90s, a lot of the hip hop heavy hitters, but in hockey, you had Kevin Weeks on the tour bus.
Yeah, everybody's been on
You
there.
yeah,
Vander Kane's been on there. Obviously,
yeah,
Willie O'Ree's been on there. PK Subban, Wayne Simmons, Joe Ward's come on there. Trevor Daly.
yep,
Whenever we stopped, and those guys want to see it because they're part of that history and they want to see what they're
right,
part of. Kelsey Kolsler, Blake
hmm,
Bolden,
yep,
Sarah Nurse. The
yep.
ladies are represented on there as well,
Indeed. And I think one of the things that was actually fascinating to me was when we were in Detroit, and
which I
Giovanni
missed.
Smith. Yeah, you weren't
I
there,
missed
but
it. I missed
but
it.
Giovanni Smith came on with Trevor Daly and another person who was on the team as well. Because they had three brothers on the team.
Yeah, yeah. I can't remember his name offhand, but he just won a Stanley Cup with Washington Capitals. But yeah,
Okay, yeah, but so it was crazy to me that I'm on the tour bus, and of course, I'm kind of like a curator, not curator, but more of a docent. Showing people around, having them fill out the survey, and telling them about all the information that you put on there. And the craziest part was watching Giovanni Smith just go wow like 15 times walking up and down the bus, because even though he made it to the highest level, which is the NHL,
yeah.
like you said before, this information is not widely known and widely spread out, which is, partly why, or a huge reason why the work that you do is really, really important.
Thank you.
So, in addition to the movie and as well as a podcast, what else are you up to, and how else are you involved in the game of hockey?
Yeah. So basically, it's really just doing work with the NHL, creating content with them, and I'm a part of their fan inclusion committee now. And for the most part, again, like I'm just that guy that people will come to, and like parents or something like that, if they're having some difficulties in their leagues and just having some advice, I mean, I don't claim to know everything, but I mean, I just try to mentor or to advise. I love connecting people. You know, that's one of my um, things that I'm most prideful. I feel like, you know, the black hockey community is so small that everybody needs to tap into each other.
Mhm.
So you have like the Black Girl Hockey Club. You got, you know, different employees that are working in all these different spaces. And so whenever I meet people, I'm always like, yo, do you know so and so? Or if I feel like somebody's doing something that's pretty funky, I'm like, oh, you know, I gotta make sure that the NHL is aware of what you're doing and who you are. Or if somebody's got a kid who's you know, having difficulty maybe paying for some training or something like that, I'm trying to connect them with somebody that can help them out. So, you know, hockey's just that thing that I kind of like, you know, my purpose was to put out a film and, you know, and use it as an educational piece, but it's drawn me in a lot more. And I'm just I just feel kind of blessed that at this stage in my life I'm able to do something that I really enjoy. So, you know, it doesn't feel like work. It's a lot of fun, you know, to be able to you know, to have some of these people like, you know, like Gary Bettman say, hey, I remember when I'd be in like the NHL office and I'd walk by him and he'd be like, hey, Kwame, and it's just that's cool to me, you know,
Mhm.
and to be able to get on these calls with guys like, you know, Vander Kane or Trevor Daly, whoever, and put them on the podcast. That's cool because I'm first and foremost have always been a fan, and there was a time I didn't know these people, and I would just be like, you know, fanning out on them, and now to be able to say I have some sort of relationship where I could talk to them is actually also pretty cool as well.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds absolutely dope.
Yeah.
um, you speak a little bit about helping people out who need it and reaching back. And, you kind of do it a little bit in the podcast as well with Akil and Elijah, which is this concept of mentorship and kind of reaching back and bringing someone along with you.
Mhm.
Can you talk about the importance of being a mentor or being a positive role model,
Yeah.
just in general,
Yeah.
but as
I
a
mean,
black person in this
yeah.
world?
I don't know if I'm so much of a mentor. I think more like when it comes to Akil and Elijah, I'm like that big uncle that just wants to see them do good and see them do great. So I'm always trying to encourage them. I'm always trying to give them positive feedback and messages and just kind of go for it, that type of thing. You know, I remember when the film came out and Akil is still a young kid at that time. I had him stand up and I told the audience, I said, you see that kid right now? I am telling you right now, that kid is going to play in the NHL. And I remember Akil telling me, he's like, that always stuck to me, you know, that always stuck because, you know, you believed in it. And I was like, hell yeah, you know, I believe in my peoples. I believe in, you know, the truth, you know. Um, but it's very important in our community to be somebody to look up to within your family first and then outside your family. I'm old school, so that's how I remember growing up. You had, you know, there's always the big uncle or the auntie or somebody, you know, in the neighborhood that was doing something positive that, you know, you wanted to look up to, you know, especially in the game of hockey, man. You want to look at somebody that can represent you or looks like you so that you know that if they can do it, you can do it. And I think that in this game, because there is so little of us in it, that every single one of us that is trying to do something counts. And we are responsible for our language, the way we conduct ourselves, and the things that we do. We are so responsible, more responsible than anybody else in any other industry, I feel, because we're so small in numbers. So I really take what I do serious. You know, it's not about the money for me, although I do need to get paid and make a living.
Mhm.
But my first love for this is like, you know, like if you look in the film, there's a kid named Nathaniel Adams. So when I rocked with him, I think Nathaniel was like 7 or 8. I mean, he's like 14 or something like that right now. I want to see him get to the highest level he possibly can in the game of hockey. And that to me is satisfying because I want to look back at this little kid that, I wanted to give him that confidence being in a film and just show. I wanted him to. I mean, I remember he went to this. There's a thing called the Brick Tournament. It's a huge tournament for the kids in Edmonton, and somebody from the States was down there and rolled up on me like, "Yo, are you that kid that was in that movie?" And that his father told me, he's like, "Yo, that just put something on his shoulders." And he was walking around with an extra piece of swag. And I'm like, yo, that's what it's all about, man. Each one teach one. We got to pass it on. We got to look out for each other, man. We can't be fighting each other. We can't be, we just got to support, man. We gotta just rock with each other and grow because, this industry of hockey owes nothing to nobody. It doesn't owe anything to any of us just because, you know what I mean? So we need to create our own path. We need to create our own future. And we need to build this. And we don't need to build it for ourselves. We need to build it for the kids. It's all about the kids. If your motivation, I'm talking to everybody out there who's dealing in that, whatever you're doing, if you're not doing it for the kids, man, you ain't doing it for the right reasons. Everything I do is for the kids because I want the kids to see that black faces and voices are normalized in the game of hockey. That's my theme. Okay, before when I first got into this, I wanted to make this film. I was like, just create content. And I realized, I'm like, yo, what am I doing this for? I'm like, okay, you know what I'm doing this for? I want to normalize black faces and voices in the game of hockey because, like I tell people all the time, I'm like, listen, if I sit down beside you and I show you a commercial with Connor McDavid on there, you're going to look at it, you're going to be like, okay. But if I showed you a commercial and it was PK Subban and it was hip hop music and Busta Rhymes was on there, you're going to be like, what? What is that? You're gonna, because but that's our natural reaction. Whenever we see a black person in a space that we don't really see them in, we're always like, and we gotta double. I want us to, when it comes to hockey and black faces and voices, I want it to be just as normal as you seeing Connor McDavid or Alexander Ovechkin. I just want it to be normal, because when we get it normal, we don't have to deal with all the stereotypes and the misconceptions and the if, ands, or buts. And even if there's always going to be naysayers, but I want it to get to a point where that's just secondary. That's,
Yeah, so we have just a couple minutes left, and there's something I do at the end of our Meet the Producers segment where I ask you a question that's a little bit outside of just what we've been talking about. So, we talked about hockey and the importance of hockey and your purpose, but what is something that you love to do outside of the world of hockey and outside of what your everyday work schedule?
Read comic books, bro.
Okay.
That's my comic books and video games. Those are my two side passions. I was heavily, I do really like reading. I haven't done it as much as I should be doing, especially during this COVID crisis. But man, if you think I get busy with the hockey, come talk to me about the comic books, bro.
All right, so you just segued into the next part. So what are your top 5 comic books?
Oh man. Okay, so top 5 comic books in no particular order. Death in the Family, Batman Year One, Wolverine, the first Wolverine series was a 4-parter. Spider-Man, the Death of Kraven the Hunter. That got busy. That series, that 5-part series really got me into I got to go to the store and pick this up every week. I got it, before it used to be like here and there, but that series where, I don't know if your audience knows who Kraven the Hunter is, but that series, Kraven the Hunter, kind of kidnapped Spider-Man, knocked him out, kind of buried him, and then he acted as Spider-Man, put on the black suit Spider-Man, and then at the end of it committed suicide. It's one of the most powerful series I've ever read. But
Wow.
those are my topsies. There's a lot more, but I mean, I didn't even talk about the Dark Knight Avenger and all that stuff. But yeah,
Wow. Did you ever read the Black Panther series?
Of course, man. You want me to go? I want me to show you something?
Yeah, please.
2 seconds. 2 seconds.
All right. So while he's going to grab the Black Panther series, or it's a comic series, I want to, and again, encourage all of our viewers to, if you've not already, to subscribe to American Legacy Network at AmericanLegacyNetwork.tv. It's $3.99 a month. We have a wealth of content on there. And so again, thank you for tuning in tonight. We're about to finish up with Kwame, but he's about to show us something serious, it looks like.
Yeah, man. Like I got like that's inside I put on a special case that I bought. So
okay.
Panther right there. This one was written by like Reginald Hoodlum and Ken Lashley, a guy from Toronto. So if you see that's Siri as her brother Black Panther. So we might get that in the new film. But yeah, man, I get busy.
I see.
I don't play.
I see. Wow, that's crazy, man.
Yeah. I just picked up this a DC book called The Other History, which is really good, and it's about Black Lightning, and and how he talks about being a Black superhero in the 70s, looking out for his neighborhood is so impactful, man. I love it. I know there's a lot of critics that don't really like it, but I really like it right now. It's a good book. So yeah.
Well, Kwame, it's beautiful to see your passion inside of hockey, outside of hockey, in the comic world. Thank you for bringing up those gems that you just brought up.
Yeah,
Thank you for dropping some of the gems. And again, I'll say it publicly, personally, as a kid who grew up playing hockey, to have a documentarian like you to capture our history in the sport and to encourage young people who are out there playing and may feel alone. I personally want to thank you for all the work that you're doing with your movie, with the NHL, the podcast, and everything else. So, and I also want to thank you for coming on and speaking with me on American Legacy Network. So this has been a really dope conversation, man. So I want to thank you again. And thank you to everyone in the Facebook world who has been tuning in for the past hour and change to Kwame and me talking a little bit. Yeah. So I'm gonna end the live, and again encourage everyone to head over to AmericanLegacy.tv. Do you have anything you want to plug?
You know what? Soul on Ice, the podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. If you haven't seen Soul on Ice, you can get it on YouTube, Amazon. Pick it up. You can rent it, watch it with the family. I think it's very interesting. Tell Pop Dukes I say what's up, and
Will do.
Thanks for having me on the show, bro.
For sure.